Hello and welcome to another edition of D&D Stories. I am your host Rob from the channel Performance Check, and this is the show where I regale you with tales from the hit role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. This is the concluding chapter of the current story arc, and this is also the concluding episode of this entire season of D&D Stories. This is the Law of Mechanus, Part 3. Last time, it was revealed to TheWriter and Drosscore that this cloaked individual that stands before them is none other than Chi Cell, a ranger of Hemlon, or at least a former ranger of Hemlon, who fell due to TheWriter's fuck-up, as Chi Cell puts it. It transpired that TheWriter, a ranger with an addiction to alcohol, had taken a little bit too much to drink one night. And it was because of this that he slept through his watch, and it is because of this that his ranger brethren were killed by bandits and brigands. This is a shock around the table, as it was assumed that there was going to be some form of higher power or higher intelligence involved that would have caused TheWriter to have amnesia, caused TheWriter to somehow be unable to recall the events of that fateful night. But, quite simply, the clue was there the whole time. TheWriter's drinking problem. Drink alone had been enough to addle TheWriter's mind for him to not remember that his friends and his compatriots had been slaughtered whilst he was on watch. Now, this had been playing in the back of TheWriter's mind for a long time, but Matt didn't know this. This was a reveal to Matt, and he wasn't sure how to take it at first. He was like, what, really? But the more he thought about it, the more he realised that it kind of made sense. TheWriter had like a crippling alcohol problem. And like I said before, this isn't something that we said lightly. We treated it with, you know, a little bit of respect, because we do understand that alcoholism is a real problem and people really suffer from it and it's a terrible disease. But regardless, that terrible disease actually has the ability to make you just have complete blackouts. Complete blackouts. I've known people to have had that. And yeah, you can see it just like all this information just clicking in Matt's brain, and he suddenly realizes that this is the reason why he's not known what's happened to his compatriots for the longest time. And it was really effective, really cool. So whilst TheWriter is sort of like stunned by this, Drosscore turns around to see that the forces of Chi Cell and the forces of Turin have suddenly been alerted to the presence. This confrontation obviously hasn't been a quiet affair, and now suddenly gnolls and goblins and orcs begin to advance upon the remaining Deep Wardens, Drosscore and TheWriter. Chi Cell basically throws TheWriter aside. He just sort of moves towards him and just hurls him against Drosscore, and sort of rolls between the Deep Wardens. Chi Cell is a ranger who could arguably said is a better ranger than TheWriter. He's of a higher level than TheWriter. So imagine TheWriter's agility and his abilities, but like plus a couple of levels, because he's, you know, he was a higher ranking ranger at the time, and he's had all of these astral adventures that he's alluded to as well. This individual has not only come back from death, but also visited other worlds. He is a terrifying multi-dimensional threat at this point, and he is able to rejoin his forces. The Deep Wardens form up as best they can, and they brace, along with Drosscore and TheWriter, as just countless knives and butchers' cleavers and weapons just scythe down at them, and initiative is rolled, and essentially the Deep Wardens, less than 20 now, I think there were about 15 at this point, 15 Deep Wardens, Drosscore and TheWriter against just a battalion of beastmen, goblins, orcs, gnolls, you name it. And they're terrified. They're like, oh my god, what is going to happen? We don't want to die here. This can't be it. But they don't see any way out. They don't have any means of teleportation. They don't really have any means of escape because they are almost instantly surrounded by the sheer amount of these people. Like, there's so many of them. TheWriter is desperately trying to use the Wardens as sort of like a wall so he can shoot over the top of them with Zenith. Drosscore is holding the front line, swinging his Urgrosh back and forth, hacking through goblins and orcs, anyone that tries to get close. A Deep Warden falls to his left. Drosscore gives out a cry, a roar, and slams his weapon again into the fray. But you can see and you can tell that this is not going to be lasting very much longer. It's a problem. These red orcs are just the worst. They are just insane. They're in a blood frenzy. Everything seems lost. Often in Dungeons and Dragons and in storytelling in general, when all hope is lost, generally speaking, that means that there could be some kind of intervening force, some deus ex machina that can spring out of the woodwork, out of nowhere, and save the day at the last minute. Let's look to the Lord of the Rings, the battle before the Black Gate, when there is the cry, the eagles are coming, when all hope is lost, and suddenly the tide of battle changes. You could argue that the eagles' inclusion, is foreshadowing enough. But this particular interruption to the battle is one that has been foreshadowed, but is still one that both Matt and Mike were too busy to worry about, to be honest. They were worried about the massive army that they now have to fight, but they didn't quite expect the most unwelcome sight, when things couldn't get worse. Somehow, they get worse. One after the other, hundreds of pillars of light descend from the heavens. One after the other. And in these pools of light, knelt down, Terminator style, rising to their feet, are the Inevitables. And not just the Colurute class that they have fought before, but all different types of Inevitables have arrived upon the field. This anomaly, this great multi-dimensional army, is to be stopped. And it is to be stopped here. Drosscore and TheWriter are following these pillars of light with their eyes upwards to see that great holes in the sky of, well, the fabric of reality, actually. Just great holes are above them, and they see through to see a giant sky filled with clockwork, cogs, and winding gears. They see a nirvana of clockwork making. They see another world. And there's just a brilliant, heavenly, angelic, almost light pouring down from the gaps between these cogs. And that is where the Inevitables strike from. They are here to amend the problem. And TheWriter and Drosscore are reinforced by an enemy even deadlier than the ones that they are facing currently. Through the battle and through the carnage, Drosscore is able to spy Zero, the Inevitable that attacked them upon the escarpment. And he is terrified but also relieved to see that the Inevitables appear to be focusing on the Red Orcs and all the other terrifying, horrible monsters that have come through from this other dimension. And the Inevitables are cleaning house. They are swiping golden blades from left to right. They are arcing, purifying magic across these abominations that they see in their eyes, at least. Chi Cell, across the battlefield, is watching in horror as his forces are being set upon by an unearthly assault. These are creatures that he recognizes. Chi Cell himself has had dealings with the Inevitables himself, because he is a planewalker, because he has jumped from one world to the other. And Theodrex is pleased to see, even across the field of battle, Chi Cell's arrogance, his bravado sort of falter slightly. And he is starting to make his way away from the battle towards Thundertop, the vast mountain forge of the dwarves. Drosscore locks eyes with Turin across the battlefield, and with a small company of what's left of his Deep Wardens, they push through the lines that have now focused their attention onto the Inevitables. They push through, and Drosscore charges at the Minotaur Lord. The dwarf and the Minotaur collide in the centre of the ranks, in the centre of the chaos, and Drosscore is able to hit the initiative first with a swinging uppercut with his Zergrosh. He slices at the Minotaur, but the Minotaur very much is an unstoppable force, ploughing directly into Drosscore, making him fall to the ground and roll as the great beast just charges over him, hacking with two cleavers whilst he does so. The great bull creature skids to a halt about 30 feet away, and he turns and he gives the most guttural snort. And he paws at the ground with a giant hoof and then charges once again, ploughing through his forces to get back at Drosscore. Now, the way that this combat panned out was kind of interesting tactically from a DM point of view, because the Minotaur was able to do charging attacks back and forth, while minions of Turin are basically continuing to swarm Drosscore in the meantime. So it was keeping Drosscore in one position, whilst the Minotaur was just going back and forth, charging at will, and Drosscore having to lock down and take the hit whilst he keeps fighting. But one spectacular round occurs where Drosscore is able to use his new feat, which at this point was like, it was like an add-on to Great Cleave, which enabled him to cut through multiple foes at a time if he killed one. So he was able to take one out, take his free 5-foot step, take another one out, take another one out, take another one out. So this really cinematic like combat scene happens where the Minotaur just passes by Drosscore once again, who locks his armor. The immovable object in this battle, the immovable force of the Minotaur, the immovable object that is Drosscore the dwarf, and then continues to like wipe out like 6 gnolls and goblins at the same time, and then like defends again from Turin's charge. The last one involving him ducking low, locking his armor, and basically bracing for the impact. And he takes the full force of the Minotaur's attack to make another grapple attempt, in which he is able to seize the bull by the horns and hurl Turin over his shoulder and onto his back. The Minotaur gives a bellow as Drosscore brings his Zergrosh high and sails it down right onto the snout of the great beast. There is an almighty crack as thunder rolls, as lightning arcs above Thundertop, as the battle halts. Everyone stands witness to Drosscore annihilate Turin. He stopped him and he killed him dead. Now, as a dungeon master, I'm surprised by this because I had statted Turin to be a vast threat, and he was, and he did a lot of damage, and I had a good tactic for him. But that was probably the best round of luck and damage and attacks done that I've ever seen from one character. It was a sight to behold, and he did. It's not like he faked it, or like, all the rolls we roll, in plain sight for everyone to see. Like, it was just incredible. There were a few criticals in there, a few effects from his weapons and stuff. It was just a mechanical beauty to behold. Speaking of mechanical beauties, the Inevitables are also pressing their attack, for the Red Orcs and indeed all the multi-dimensional foes have witnessed their leader's death and are beginning to panic, and they are beginning to rout. TheWriter is watching this army begin to retreat, the Inevitables slaughtering them as they make their attempt for freedom. The Ranger whirls about and is just able to narrowly dodge a swipe from Zero. The Inevitable has decided to break from the rest of his inevitable kin and finish what he had started back on the escarpment. Now TheWriter has this creature to deal with as well, and all the while trying to defend himself, TheWriter is trying to reason with the creature. "Can't you see? We're both fighting on the same side," he yells as he ducks again, and is forced to basically make an attack against the Inevitable, striking at the creature and rolling behind its defenses, striking it again with his longsword. The Inevitable slowly rises and utters these words of warning. "You may be opposed to extra-dimensional forces in battle here, but you are still an anomaly and you will be corrected." And it raises its shining golden blade as 15 remaining Deep Wardens charge the Inevitable. These Dwarven warriors have just broken through the mass, have somehow survived, and now take the fight to TheWriter's attacker. The Inevitable wheels about, trying to bring down the might of Mechanus upon the dwarves, but the folk of the Undercroft are made of sterner stuff. Deflecting his attack, the machine creature is brought to his knees, and TheWriter is able to deliver a fining, clanking strike against the side of the Inevitable's neck. The head of this robotic creature flies forth. Zero, designation 0, and he is no more. You would think. The head bounces and rolls down a hill and stops, resting against the body of a dead gnoll. TheWriter goes to investigate in the sort of pause in the battle now they've taken out Zero, and sees that there is still light in the eyes of this creature's, eyes. It's still functioning somewhat. TheWriter has an idea, and he snatches up the skull of the Inevitable, gives word to Drosscore and the Deep Wardens, and they retreat, rushing away from the closing calamity of the rest of the Inevitables taking out the army. TheWriter is desperately looking around, trying to get a glimpse of Chi Cell, and sees him dashing towards Thundertop, the great dwarven forge, the mountain forge. Drosscore, TheWriter, and the Deep Wardens are able to hunker down in a hiding spot amongst the battlefield. They just, tumble into a ditch and sort of, try to be as sly as possible whilst they can still hear the screams and the turmoil of battle gone awry. And TheWriter just holds up the head of Zero and says, "Drosscore, look!" Drosscore is still out of breath from his battle with Turin and says, "Great, what are we going to do with that?" "Exactly what we need to," says TheWriter, and he clasps the Inevitable's head and he gives it a shake and he says, "You, Zero, whatever your name is." The light seems to flicker slightly in the eyes of the Inevitable's skull. "You are tasked with bringing order to every reality. Is that correct?" There is a pause. "Correct." "You are now incapable of doing so. We have defeated you. However, we can make sure that the forces of Chi Cell are stopped. Designation 1-99 have this honor." "You mean the other Inevitables?" "That is correct." "Why aren't you taking out Chi Cell now then?" says Theodrex. There is a pause. The rift that Chi Cell has used is in the heart of the mountain. So why don't you go and stop him then? Why don't your friends go and stop him? Says Theodrex, getting desperate now. It is not within our jurisdiction. Jurisdiction, says Theodrex. Jurisdiction? What's that supposed to mean? How is an entire different plane of reality your jurisdiction, but one mountain forge? Oh no, that's not in your jurisdiction. It is a rift. It is a point where all dimensions meet. Thundertop is the prime event. Thundertop is the prime location. I don't understand, says Theodrex. Chi Cell has evaded us. He has retreated to the mountain. Thundertop is a point that meets all dimensions. Thundertop is a fissure that could crack the surface of this entire realm. This is not an acceptable risk. Retreat, retreat. Wait, says Theodrex. Just wait. If Chi Cell threatens the entire multiverse, then it is my fault. It is my fault that he has been driven across different realities. He might have taken it a bit too far, a bit too personally, but it still is down to me. If you sanction me, I can go in. I can stop him. Drosscore just stares. It's me that he wants anyway. He's only made this journey to this realm. He's only reinforced Turin with these terrifying beasts just to get to me. If I go in there, maybe he can be reasoned with, or maybe he can be stopped. The Inevitable's eyes flash red. Message directed to Inevitable Units 1299. You are sanctioned, but be aware you are still an anomaly. When the deed is done, you will be corrected. Yeah, correct away, says Theodrex. Are you ready, Drosscore? Drosscore gets to his feet, sort of brushing off his armour, rolls his shoulders. He must have killed many dwarves to take control of Thundertop already. We have work to do. And he nods to his Deep Wardens, who hit their Urgroshes against their breastplates, and together they begin their pursuit of Chi Cell towards the mountain. Theodrex hangs Zero's skull from his belt the whole time. So what that exchange proves is that even a lawful, neutral, robotic entity can be reasoned with a good enough diplomacy check. And Theodrex and Drosscore are temporarily aligned with the Inevitables to bring about a stop to Chi Cell. I didn't want to dump too much of the lore on you, but we went into it a bit more, and essentially the reason how Chi Cell has been able to move into this dimension is through Nirendale, through the Thundertop Forge. The power of the Forge is so great, and such is the lightning that pours from the sky into it. That energy basically makes the fabric of reality a little bit flimsier around that particular area at the very summit. And so it is that Drosscore turns to his Deep Wardens at this vast gate at the very bottom of the mountain and says, "My brothers, you are to hold here. You are to prevent any forces from catching us in our flank. It has been an honour." And he sort of like salutes each one of them, and he sort of like does the dwarven headbutt thing, like they headbutt each other or whatever. And together, Theodrex and Drosscore delve deep into Thundertop. Making their way through Thundertop is by no means an easy feat, and in fact it took an entire session for them to traverse it. Essentially, it was just filled with the remaining forces of this extra-dimensional army. So Theodrex and Drosscore are hacking through red-skinned orcs and facing all kinds of different anomalies and monsters that have poured through the breach. All the while, they are seeing what's happened to Thundertop. It's become this thriving base from which Chi Cell has been able to execute his plans from. At one point, they are basically battling at the Underforge, which is the point directly beneath the summit, at the very top. And the energy of the lightning channels down through the mountain into the magma forge at the bottom. This is where the hardest metals that you could create in the D&D universe can be sort of forged. So this is where adamantine and mithril are shaped and woven by the dwarven smithing lords of old. And because of this, they see that there are a number of like mithril sort of weapons and bits of armor and stuff. So they're able to help themselves to bits like that. Drosscore keeps his mithril sort of not his mithril, sorry. He had his interlocking deep warden armor that locks when he stands still. That's how he beat Turin. TheWriter helps himself to a mithril mail shirt, and also helps himself to some cool arrows as well and things like that. The terrifying thing, however, is that they're looking at one of the molds that have been created in this forge, and the armor looks massive. So whatever this armor that was made out of this mold looks pretty big, and they're able to determine from a mold next to it, the mold of a helm, that this was to be an armor set to be used by Turin. And originally I had intended for the Minotaur to fight them at the forge, and he was going to put on this armor that was going to make him even stronger, essentially. Mithril armor on a Minotaur. But thankfully they don't have to deal with that, and the armor is nowhere to be found. So they press on, and they realise that to fight their way all the way up to the top of the mountain is just going to be pointless, and they're going to run out of HP, they're going to run out of all of their resources, and then they're not going to have anything to use to fight Chi Cell, who they reliably now know has gone to the top of the mountain. So they need to find a way up there and a way to bypass the rest of these forces. And TheWriter has an idea. Looking at an ornate pulley system that goes all the way through, from the Underforge all the way to the very top, there is a pulley system to take various ingredients and resources and things up to the top of the mountain. TheWriter takes his immovable rods that he managed to retrieve from the Ghost-like pass, and he fixes the immovable rods onto the pulleys, so him and Drosscore are able to hold on to these immovable rods and be taken all the way up to the top of the mountain. It's something that I didn't expect them to do, but I bet, to tell you the truth, I'd forgotten they had the immovable rods, and they're really cool magical items, and they can be troublesome, as you will see very shortly. However, for the time being, they're able to press the buttons, the immovable rod fix onto the pulley, and they are taken up to the very top of the mountain. And so it is when they arrive at the very summit, a cold wind whips up the cloaks of Drosscore and TheWriter. They detach themselves from this pulley system and exit this sort of catacomb-like cave and emerge on the very, very top. They see this colossal metal anvil that has steps running up to the top of it. And halfway up those steps, making some kind of strange ritual area with different bits of equipment and strange magical looking devices, there is Chi Cell. And he stops to turn as he sees our two heroes sort of standing there, just staring at him. Ah, I am so very glad that you have chosen to come here. Did the Inevitables tell you why they could not approach? Even the soldiers of Mechanus fear me now. They understand that I need only one more lightning strike, and I can bring about an end to every reality, and bring about the end of every TheWriter of Hemlon that has ever existed, or that ever will exist. Drosscore starts to laugh. TheWriter sort of turns, looking in surprise. Why are you laughing? Drosscore eventually manages to wipe the tears from his eyes, and he says, You must have some serious psychological defects if you are willing to unmake reality itself just to get revenge on one drunken ranger. I have seen many things, says Chi Cell, and I know the things that individual there is capable of. I have seen dimensions where time works differently, where I have seen a Theodrex of the future who cannot die, a Theodrex of the future who will bring an end to all things. This is simple. Theodrex shoots Chi Cell in the chest. The evil ranger tumbles down the stairs and lands painfully at the bottom. Rising with fury in his eyes, he says, "You think a simple arrow will be the end of me?" He snaps it, draws his blade. "If you thought I would be fighting both of you, you have made a grave error. As I said, I have seen this happen many times, and I have learned to prepare for such things. Even the death of my commander-in-chief." And he glances, and across the other side, from behind the anvil, there is a ka-drunk, ka-drunk, ka-drunk. There, standing before our heroes, is a towering, mithril armoured Minotaur. Well, it's just the armour, animated. You see, I have come to learn that when I arrive on a different plane and interact with a brand new Tauren, I was sure to make certain preparations. Certain to make sure that if he were to fall once, he could rise to fight again and again and again. All I needed was his essence. He does not need a mind. He does not need any motivation of any other kind than what I give him. And his new motivation is thus: kill the dwarf. The mithril Minotaur immediately charges at Drosscore, horns down, fire blazing out of the gaps in the armour. This animated armour suit is terrifying, and with a ka-chang, 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 it charges forward. Drosscore gives a nod to Theodrex. Theodrex gives a nod to Drosscore. Drosscore puts the flat of his Urgrosh horizontal. Theodrex jumps onto the flat of the Urgrosh and leaps over the Minotaur, drawing Zenith, his sun-casting bow, and firing bolt after illuminating bolt after Chi Cell as Drosscore locks his armour and takes the charge from the Minotaur once again. This time Chi Cell is ready with a bow of his own, firing a shot which deflects Theodrex's. He whirls about, fires another shot at Theodrex. The arrow pierces his leg and he stumbles. As Theodrex is desperately trying to climb to his feet, Chi Cell is upon him, longsword in hand. Theodrex is able to quick draw and parry the strike as they begin to sword fight their way around the anvil. Chi Cell is just glaring at his betrayer as he sees him and says, "I have learned many of the higher mysteries and have been taught many skills and been bestowed with many great powers by a benefactor that would see you fall. I will not fail." Drosscore is desperately trying to get to his feet, pulling himself up as this mithril Minotaur rounds on him. He sees once again that the great beast is digging up dirt with a silvery hoof, lowering its terrifying horns, and it charges once again. This time, however, Drosscore has a different strategy for the charge. He waits and waits and waits until the Minotaur is a millisecond from impact, and then he presses the button on the immovable rod at ankle height and hurls himself to the side. The mithril Minotaur is unable to stop. As we know, it takes 30 feet for him to do his turnaround thing, to do a proper charge, and unfortunately for the mithril Minotaur, that means he trips over the immovable rod. Nothing on this earth can move it. And a mithril Minotaur just tumbles over it and slams into the pulley system, which just shatters at the top. The great beast tumbles down the pit from the very, very pinnacle of the mountain all the way down to the underforge, to the boiling rock below. As the dark clouds above begin to crackle with electricity, Chi Cell stares at the clouds forming above the anvil with a grin. It isn't long now, TheWriter. It isn't long before lightning strikes and this entire realm fractures. Everything you've done here has been for nothing. TheWriter, exhausted, holds his sword pointed towards his foe and he says, "If this is the end, you might as well tell me, this benefactor of yours, who gave you all of these powers far beyond any ranger of Hemlon, who was it?" Chi Cell smiles and says, "You could just say he's merely a presence." There is a lightning arcing across the sky. "Not long now," says Chi Cell, "and everything that you have done and everything that you will ever do will be undone." There is a roll of thunder. Lightning arcs and shoots down towards the anvil. But there is something in its way. Drosscore Hammerstone of the Undercroft has run up the stairs and takes a swing at the lightning bolt with his Urgrosh. Or more accurately, he swings his Urgrosh down at the anvil. Lightning channels through the Urgrosh and through Drosscore and through the anvil. There is a sonic sound as a new type of weapon is forged. Drosscore has a limited knowledge of this forge, but he has actually been here before. As a younger dwarf, he has seen how great weapons have been forged upon that anvil. He channels the lightning through his very body, and it pours into his new weapon. The Urgrosh crackles with electricity and sings with the sound of thunder as the charred and frazzled Drosscore stares at it. His Urgrosh has been transformed. He looks to the sky and holds it aloft and says, "Thundergrosh!" Thundergrosh is the new weapon that Drosscore wields, and he swings it as he charges at Chi Cell. "Check out my dwarven might!" Drosscore bellows as thunder rolls once again, and he brings Thundergrosh over his shoulder and slams it into the ground in front of Chi Cell and TheWriter. The shockwave is enough to lift both of the rangers off their feet, and they both tumble over the edge of the mountain. Drosscore stands bewildered for a second, not quite comprehending what he has done. His first act was to use his new magical weapon to just channel that power into the ground, and the shockwave just took them both off the mountain. And they both made reflex saves as well. Like, this isn't just something that happened. Like, I made them roll, and they both just off the edge. So they have this epic sword fight, and then all of a sudden Drosscore admittedly foils the plan to channel the electricity through the mountain by, I guess, absorbing it himself and into the weapon. But now just totally shits on the dramatic confrontation at the top of the mountain. However, it is not over. Drosscore realizes he has to at least try and help TheWriter, so not really thinking about it. And in a repeat of what has happened in D&D stories starring these characters before, Drosscore takes a running jump and leaps off the mountain after them to try and catch up. What we now witness is a breathtaking and stunning, desperate battle between TheWriter and Chi Cell as they both plummet from the mountain. Thundertop has a sheer side off the very edge, and that is what they're falling off. They are just plunging through clouds and vapours down this colossal mountain as lightning is arcing around them, and they're struggling with each other, trying to get the upper hand, both knowing that they're falling to oblivion. Drosscore from out of nowhere collides with one of them, I ask. You've got to roll a 50-50. Let's see which one you're able to grab. Is it Chi Cell or TheWriter? He rolls. It's Chi Cell. Drosscore is then latched onto Chi Cell. They're tumbling over and over. Chi Cell just tries to kick out wildly and hits TheWriter in the jaw, causing him to spin away from them as they continue plunging towards the ground. TheWriter is sort of looking up and seeing both the Drosscore and Chi Cell locked in a desperate struggle. Drosscore is trying to get an angle to try and hit Chi Cell with Thundergrosh. He swings and there is a deafening sonic explosion as Thundergrosh clips something and like debris and rock from the rock face they're next to explodes and they're all sort of sent tumbling in different directions. TheWriter is still beneath the pair of them now, looking up at them, still fighting. He reaches into his belongings and grabs the only thing that he thinks might be able to help right now. He lifts his arm up and he presses the button on an immovable rod. And let's go. I ask for a 50-50 roll. 1, 2, 3 on a d6. Chi Cell hits the immovable rod at terminal velocity. 4, 5, 6, Drosscore does. I ask Mike to roll the d6. He rolls a 3. Chi Cell explodes. His face plants into the immovable rod at terminal velocity. There is a and Drosscore just falls past like the blood vapor that just explodes in front of him, covering the dwarf just in blood. Our two adventurers are falling. Both of them are just speechless at the horrendous image that will be burned into their minds for the rest of their lives, which won't be too long because the ground is rapidly approaching them from beneath, oddly enough. Well, Drosscore, my brother in arms, it has been a pleasure, says TheWriter, as the ground gets closer and closer and closer. Drosscore just looks down at TheWriter's belt and says, "No, don't you see? There is a way!" He is able to sort of grab hold of TheWriter as they're both falling blistering speeds towards the rock below. Drosscore grabs Zero, the elemental skull, from TheWriter's belt, and he looks into the glowing red eyes and he says, "Inevitables! Sanction is complete! Chi Cell has been stopped! It is time to correct the anomaly!" There's a and our heroes are teleported. Most of the speed they had gathered was dissipated when they were teleported, but regardless, TheWriter and Drosscore land in a very painful pile upon the floor. They stand and they realise that they are on the battlefield, which is now empty but for the bodies of the fallen monsters and red orcs that had been dispatched in the battle. They are surrounded by the Inevitables. They stand looking at them with dispassionate machine expressions. Slowly, TheWriter and Drosscore get to their feet. "You were sanctioned to rid this plane of the abomination, the Plane Walker. You were successful in this plight." "Yes, we were," says TheWriter. "But as Zero stated," and he holds up the skull of Zero, "we have unfinished business." "That is correct," another Inevitable says. "You are anomalies. Your service is commendable, but you must still be corrected." "Corrected?" says TheWriter. "Yeah, well, of course. We absolutely understand that we have to be corrected. But there's one thing that I'm afraid to say your brethren, counterpart, friend here, Zero, neglected to do when he first encountered us in this land." What is that? Says the inevitable. He forgot to make a history check, says TheWriter. Look us up. There is a moment where TheWriter and Drosscore hold their breath as the inevitables scan them once more. You can see that we have smited the undead forces of a powerful necromancer, a blight against the natural order, is it not? There is silence from the inevitables. We've stopped great evil from across the seas in Lockthorn. We have stopped and prevented a devilish invasion, infernal magic that would have erupted in the heart of Ireland. And we stopped the Star Thief, a god, from ascending against the natural order. Yet, of course, we are anomalies, and you must correct us. But now, why don't you have a look and see what happens if you take us out of this timeline, this dimension now? Chi Cell said that I was capable of many other things. Many other things are yet to happen, and I believe they are yet to happen in this world too. Check that. The inevitables continue to scan. You are an anomaly, says the inevitables. TheWriter and Drosscore continue to hold their breaths. And you are necessary. And so it was that TheWriter and Drosscore were able to theoretically use something known as the Destiny Trap, wherein, because foreknowledge is known in a past timeline, they're able to insist that that is what is going to make those events happen. For the inevitables to remove TheWriter and Drosscore at this point would fracture the future. So, with a crazy-ass diplomacy check, TheWriter and Drosscore are able to escape correction for now. But the inevitables will be back. They will be back to amend the problems and the anomalies at a future date. That is essentially where that campaign drew to a close. Drosscore was able to return to the Undercroft and was seen as a saviour. He was the dwarf that was able to liberate Thundertop that had been unknowingly taken with 15 Deep Wardens, you know. TheWriter was hailed as a hero too, obviously assisting their dwarven lord, Drosscore. And they were able to take a moment to relax and to dwell upon how far they come from this point. And after a while, they decided to leave to look for Valdane. Because they still owe him a debt. They still owe him their lives. It was Valdane that was the one that returned them from hell. Valdane has been journeying for some time. He had taken a ship and charted a course west, away from Main Realm. He is going back to a place he had vowed to never return. Valdane's boots scrape across the gravelly beach as he pulls a rowing boat onto the shore and he signals the ship that he'd charted a course on to leave without him. And he turns. He is standing upon a relatively small island, and at the very top of this island, it sort of like moves up onto this mound, this sort of large escarpment hill. There is a solitary building. It is a vast building, and it is completely surrounded with high stone walls and protected by forces that cannot be seen by the untrained eye. Valdane has returned to the Arcane Asylum. It is the place where he was imprisoned and betrayed by his former brother-in-arms, as it were, Datsner. The sorcerer's long coat sweeps behind him in the sea breeze as he approaches the gates that are guarded by a number of mage hunters, specialist soldiers that are trained to tackle foes of an arcane nature. Valdane approaches the gates with his hands held high. He says, "Hello there. My name is Valdane. I've come to commit myself." The guards just stare, look at each other, and then back to the sorcerer. "You what?" one of them says. I'm here to commit myself. I actually escaped here from a number of years ago, but I've come back. I've come back to commit myself." The guards just stare at each other and then back to Valdane again and go, "Why?" And Valdane smiles and says, "I must be mad." And that is where we're going to leave this edition and indeed this series of D&D stories. I really hope you've enjoyed that story arc, The Law of Mechanus, and indeed all of the stories that I've been telling whilst T has been on his hiatus and I've been taking over for him. I just wanted to take a moment at the end of this video to address some things that I've been wanting to say for a little while. First of all, I would like to thank T for the opportunity of this challenge, and a challenge it has been. I've been recording these D&D stories in between a lot of other work commitments, and T has been infinitely patient with me whilst waiting for me to record and edit and send these stories over to him. So that's been great, and he's been a real pleasure to work with. And doubtless, now that he's had a hiatus, had a rest, he's going to be returning to D&D stories for season 6, I believe it is. And that'll be great, because I now understand the job that T has when he does D&D stories, and while our styles are radically different, it's still a vast undertaking. So I have even more respect for him than I already did, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of structuring in your mind how to tell a good story about D&D, which is a game that we all know a lot about, so it's a challenge to make it interesting just telling you about it, and I've really enjoyed that challenge, and I've really enjoyed the fact that I've been able to talk about these old characters that I've, games that they haven't been in games for a good many years. This was obviously back in the 3.5 days, and those characters and indeed the setting of Main Realm is something that means a lot to me. And in telling these stories, it's kind of rekindled my interest in that setting. It isn't a setting that I've ever gone back to, but now I'm going to. As I say at the beginning of every one of these that I've done, my name is Rob and I'm from the channel Performance Check. I've noticed that a few people in the comments have been asking, well, when this season comes to an end and T takes over, what's going to happen? Are these stories going to end? Well, now I can tell you reliably that no, that isn't the case. Number one, I am going to commit to the fact that I will be continuing the story of TheWriter, Drosscore and Valdane and other characters that we started to play in Main Realm from this point onwards, actually, in the story. I'm going to be continuing telling the stories because I've really enjoyed doing this. It's been a real pleasure to interact with a new audience as well. So for all of you who have watched all of the episodes, or just some of the episodes, or even just one episode that I've done, I just want to thank you very much for your attention and for your love of this hobby. It's the only reason why we're watching these videos or why we make videos like this, is because we all love the same thing, and that is nothing but a good thing. So what's in the future for TheWriter, Drosscore and Valdane? Well, as you just saw, Valdane has committed himself back into the Arcane Asylum. He is still the Devil's Champion. He still has to get even and pay that debt to Mephistopheles. In the future, we're going to see Theodrex, Drosscore, and Valdane working together against the great game of the dragons. We're going to see them face up against the aftermath of what happened when the Empire began to fall because of the Empirical crashing into the abyss. There are many more stories that have happened to these characters that I've yet to cover. So I'm really excited about exploring that. I'm also going to be hopefully posting a map of Main Realm onto the TheWriter Facebook group. I'll ask T if he minds posting it there. I will also be posting it on my Facebook group, Performance Check on Facebook, just so you can now see the world in which these characters inhabit as well, if that's something that you would like to see. So that's about it for now. Once again, thank you to TheWriter for being as accommodating and wonderful as he is. And thank you to all of you for watching. And all that leaves me to say is these words. Keep gaming.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the D&D Stories Facebook, Patreon, and t-shirts on Redbubble. Keep gaming!
This is report number 170 something. All the ship's repairs are complete and not a moment too soon. All of Rob's transmissions are complete, so I will be leaving international waters off the coast of the United Kingdom and heading back to Lake Superior as promised. All the solar panels worked perfectly. Thank you for the new furniture, etc., etc. 01 should be fine to function for quite a bit longer now, and if we, schedule some sunny daytime, we can continue to use the solar panels while we're in Lake Superior and not have the batteries fail on us a second time. So 01 is all set to go to continue transmission. Within the next couple of weeks, we're going to head across the ocean at a pretty comfortable cruising speed now that we're back up to 100% power, and I'll see you guys again soon. So, end of report.